Alright, hey everybody. So we're going to go through the process from start to finish to create a remotely detonated explosive. I don't know how much we're going to get done in this episode, but I'll make sure I record each part. Okay, so the first step is to make a GitHub repository. So we're going to get this over here. I'm going to go to my little thing here. Now this one's going to be private, simply because it's a client commission. Now, the client requested that I try to keep some parts of his commission private, so that way they can reserve usage for the modpack. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new repository, and this is going to be for all of his little pieces that he wants for his modpack, all in one repository. We'll continue to build on top of these pieces as we go. So we'll go here. Let me go to my profile here. Luckily, thanks to I have a student account, I can sit here and make private repositories. Unfortunately, we can't afford to do this for the organization account because it's like 250 bucks plus like $10 per user or something like that, which is a lot of money when you consider that the entire organization makes less than that per month, and that's on all of our projects. So we're gonna just call this Wojudo Commissions. This is the guy's username. I'm not gonna tell you what it's username on, so you guys can't go poke him, but this will be his private stuff. And we'll initialize with a readme, and we'll go ahead and create it. And then what we can do is hit clone here. So once it's created, you can actually just clone this and do whatever. Of course, this will be private, so none of you guys will be able to actually get access to this code, but you'll be able to see me work on it. And most of this code is going to be really simple to start with. So we'll go ahead and clone this down. Now I'll go ahead and put this underneath my freelancing tab. Right now I've literally only got one other freelancing project going on. It's been an ongoing one I've been working on for over a year, so generally I get more, but as soon as I usually complete them, I drop them out of the freelancing list. That way I can keep my list pretty small, as this list is getting out of hand really quickly. I added folders to it, but every time you open up source tree, all the folders are open up by default, which completely defeats the point of folders if you've got to scroll down and find things. I've actually planning on replacing this software here down the road. I've actually got a project already started for it and have been designing out what it should look like. And to be honest, the software I'm designing looks not much different than this to start with. The only difference is it plans to work better. This thing likes to freeze and stop functioning, and overall for a company that specializes in making development software, this thing likes to fail more often than it should. But we go ahead and clone this, so then we can go ahead and source tree, hit project structure, hit the plus sign for new modular. All projects in or all parts in IntelliJ are called modulars. IntelliJ is actually designed to make a single application. It's not actually designed what I'm trying to use it for, which is building tons of really small plugins. Ideally, from what I've been told, is if you ever use this software properly, you're supposed to have a new workspace per project. I refuse to open tons of IntelliJ windows like I've got to do with some of my other projects, so we'll go ahead and just continue doing it the way I do it. See if I can find it here. Hopefully I stuck in the right place. So hit refresh one more time. This is where putting a search bar in here would just be absolutely amazing. Here we go. Do that real quick, and I will change this to match my naming convention. And then we'll go ahead and make sure it's putting the IML file in the right spot. So click like that. Then we'll add the dependency of ZDeps. Now ZDeps in my workspace is pretty much Minecraft. It's got, I believe, one or two other dependencies in it. I believe JUnit is automatically tagged in with this, as JUnit's a really important thing to have in all your workspaces. And we'll go ahead and untag this real quick, and then we'll go make the basic folder setup. Now, when I make the basic folder setup, the easiest way to do this is literally just go copy another project. You don't have to overcomplicate it. People tell you like, hey, you should make all things from scratch. The reality of it is when you actually do this stuff professionally, you end up copying your own code more than you should, simply because you don't have time to do anything else. And I've got a ton of projects, so time is not something I have. But we're going to go ahead and copy this. We're going to ignore that file. I've been copying Breadstone. Like every project I've done in the last like 4 weeks, I've been copying Breadstone. This is a project I gave one of my interns to do. The intern never did it. He keeps trying to do it. He never gets anywhere. The mod was supposed to be a comical mod where you turn bread, or rather stale bread, into brick walls. We thought of this ideal, I believe, in one of our shitstorm sessions, where it's not quite literally what it means by shitstorming. We were laughing around and going like, hey, what if we make a breadstone mod? Same thing people do when they're high, except we weren't high. I don't know how exactly that works for developers, but we somehow are capable of doing it. Well, let's go back out, and we'll go over to his mod here, and we'll paste all this in. And then we just have to go into the Gradle properties, and we just got to change the mod name here. So this will be, we'll just call Wo Judo is what we'll just call the archive base. And we'll do the same thing with the group name. Of course, when the client actually gives me a name for this, this stuff will get renamed to something else. You know, I'm going to also call the org Wojudo because even though we're producing this, it is his property. Well, technically it's not his property. We actually own the code and all the assets in it. He simply gets to use it, and he's paying for essentially my work hours. Because due to the fact how the Minecraft ELA is designed, I'm actually not allowed to sell mods. At least I'm not supposed to. I've been told by a few Minecraft developers I actually can get away with it, but it's highly suggested just not to do it because A, the community will come down on me pretty hard, and then B, I'll probably get disowned. Which is two things you don't want to have happen when you're a mod developer. But basic structure, go in here, resources, I need to add the assets file. I believe I spelled that right. Actually, I did not spell that right. It is too early in the morning, and I have definitely not slept yet, so that's happened. I'm actually have to stay awake for the next couple hours waiting to go pick up my brother from a dental appointment because they're going to drug him up before they drill his teeth, and that means he can't drive. So I'm now stuck making sure he's going to be okay. I'll probably rename all this package structure to whatever the client's stuff is, just to make sure it matches properly. Shoot. I just got a text. Okay, cool. My brother sent me the address to go where I'm supposed to pick him up in a couple hours. Awesome. So I don't have to worry about that. The structure is all set up. Now if I go in here, this should, in theory, reload. Should reload. Come on. Of course, IntelliJ's being its normal self. We'll hit OK here real quick. File, project structure. And yes, it's all here. So we want to exclude the Gradle package because we don't want it showing up. And then we want to mark the Java and resources as source folders. Now, technically, you can actually mark this as a resource folder and it should work properly. However, I mark it as a source folder just in case any of the resources change. It will actually put the files back into the right spot. And occasionally, every so often, so many IntelliJ versions, the resource folder breaks. So marking as a source folder fixes that. And it works better because you're never going to be touching your asset files in a day-to-day basis. So them being a sort like this works out. Because IntelliJ is smart enough, it doesn't recompile things that have not been changed. Of course, it's not going to be compiling assets, it just moves them from one folder to another. But it'll detect changes and move stuff around. But here's the file structure, everything's there. We can now see it in our mod list. If you don't have any files, by the way, or any packages, IntelliJ will not show stuff up in here. You'll have to switch to like Project View to see what you're doing, but Project View is impossible to read. Well, not impossible, but it's a pain in the ass. So let's see. We're literally just going to call this mod. Actually, no, I can't call it mod, so I need to think of something else. If you hit Shift F6, you can refactor anything. And in this case, we're going to call this, I don't have an inventive name for this. I don't really just want to name everything after the client at this point. We're just going to do that. Yeah, named after the client again because Why not? And what we're going to do is we're going to go grab one of the other mods real quick. Of course, we just did the grappling mod here, so we're going to go down here, and then I'm going to copy content out of here. So we've got the annotation here. This defines and tells Forge that this is a mod and needs to be loaded. Then it tells us what our mod ID is. The mod ID is also called the domain. It needs to match your asset folder name. So this will be, we're just going to call it the client's name, and we'll rename all of this here later when he tells me what to call it. And we'll just be like this. And then we just need to go copy all of this fun stuff out of here. So we need the version number. We need to track if it's a dev mode because we want to add some extra debug information that it doesn't show up in the actual final version. We need the logger. We're going to probably have a packet handler, so we're going to want to keep that. Going to probably have a proxy, so we're going to grab that. And then we want to copy these methods. And I'll explain what these are after I'm done copying, so that those of you that are trying to actually learn from me doing this can learn something. Eventually I will make tutorials actually on how to mod, but these will work as a good substitution for people that try to want to learn but aren't quite there. Now what I've copied in, these are constants. These keep track of my version number. Now in the Gradle scripts, the Gradle scripts know how to edit the source files, and they actually edit these to replace these with numbers. So this gets replaced with numbers coming out of, or if I can find the folder, go out to here, into this folder. Say we got a Gradle property file, major, minor, revision, major, minor, revision, and we get the build number too. This is inserted by the build server itself. If the build server isn't present, this actually defaults to the time of day. That way we can keep track of who did what. And then these all combine into a version, which is then used up here. Of course, I got to rename this because we copied it. If I can highlight properly. I would say I need more coffee, but the honesty is I have actually stopped drinking coffee here recently, and it's not been the easiest thing in the world, but it's definitely paid off. Let's see, anything else I need to grab from here? Nothing really needs to be handled. I do need to define what the packet manager is, and that's registered really late, but I guess it doesn't matter. And of course, then we have to copy the code. Now the network code's over here, and this is actually pretty easy. This is copied from VoltsEngine, but has been simplified slightly because most of these mods do not need the overly complicated network code that VoltsEngine has. Although I plan to actually beef up the network code in VoltsEngine at some point because I need to get it dropped out into some abstract format that is really simple to port between Minecraft versions. Oh shoot, I did not want to move those. I actually want to copy these. So hit copy and then paste. Okay, that's my professor telling me he finally realized that he fucked up on grading. Gotta love professors. Some of the most busiest people in the world. They make mistakes, but at least they're good at recognizing that they've made mistakes. At least the professors I've had. That being said, I've had some pretty bad professors in the past too. For example, I had a professor that has thrown me out of the classroom repeatedly, but hopefully that's all been sorted out and the professor is finally done trying to hate my guts. So I never did figure out what was wrong with that professor, that from day one I entered her classroom, she just didn't like me. Couldn't tell if it was because of the way I dressed, because I dress like a slob half the time. It's just part of the I don't care attitude. Let's see, we're missing something because it's acting like it doesn't like what it found. I think I imported the wrong packet class. Yes, I did. Okay, so we want to redo this real quick. Import class, and I want this packet. There we go. That fixes that. Need to remove these, comment this out, and then I need to clear all that out and import things. So I'm not going to really explain how the network code works because, all honestly, I barely know how it works myself. But the simplest ideal is that you send a packet from the client to the server to server to the client. There's a lot of backend code that exists inside Forge and Minecraft that takes the packet, turns it into little bits that get sent over the network, takes it back from the little bits, turns it back into your packet message. This is our message. We've of course called it packet. The reality of it is it's actually a message data object that has been serialized and deserialized. It's instantiated. Then the write method or the read method is called from when you're receiving it. Write method is called before it's turned into little bits, and so on and so on. Not overly complicated. Actually, it's really simple when you actually dig into it, but the backend can get really confusing quickly. I've actually written my own network code for Netty, which is what Minecraft actually uses for its backend, and I'm slowly learning how to use that. I've actually got a game I'm developing which does use it, but easily to say it's not the most easiest thing to understand. We'll go ahead and we need to switch over the logger. The logger is pretty straightforward as well. We're using a library for the logger. I believe it is log4j, which is made by Apache. They've got a lot of backend code that goes into that. It is even more complicated than network code, surprisingly. Like the network code is easy to understand because you know it's just a send and receive pattern, and most of it's handled until you get to the really basic low-level stuff, which then creates the actual connection on your computer between point A and B, and then turns everything from data to bytes to from bytes to bits, from bits into electrical impulses. It gets really complicated when you get down to the lowest level, but we're not going to worry about that. All this code looks good. I will have to add this back later. The discriminators, which is what these are, or yeah, discriminator. These are what actually tell Forge what my packet is, or rather tells the FML index message-to-message wrapper, which is the implementation, which actually does the discriminator and everything. I actually have something very similar to this in the game I've developed. I did not base it on Forge, so those people that try to accuse me of taking code from Minecraft. I looked at their code. I thought about replicating and I went like, they got way too much stuff in here and none of this I actually need. When you actually do code and stuff, it's encode, decode. The message stuff is actually much, much more simple. I actually can show this code too. If I can scroll up, tabletop game. I literally do have network code up here. And packets, not much different than what I've already got. And then I've got a decoder and an encoder. Rather than doing what Forge did and they've got it all in one class, I actually separated mine out. This is what mine looks like. It creates a buffer, writes the buffer, encodes the buffer, adds it to my outbound, adds a break line so I know when the packet ends. The decoder, which is actually not finished, reads in the ID, then it's going to build the packet. So this object is the packet. We do have packet types. Right now I'm working on a chat packet. That's literally the extent of my network code in the game I'm working on. I've spent more time on the actual functionality of the game than I have spent on the network, but the network code needs to actually be built up here. But back to Minecraft modding, since that's what you guys are here for. I've got to do a lot more importing. This is, by the way, the reason I don't understand how the network code works very well. Network code was originally written by TGame14, who was somebody who worked with the UE team back in the day. He made the code for us. The code was given over to Calclavia. Calclavia then gave it over to me, so I do have full ownership of it. But I make sure I leave his author name up there because, after all, he actually did make this code, and I can't claim to have made it. So we'll go ahead and fix this, and we just got to do the imports here. This is basically the boring boilerplate stuff. But I figured I'd show it all because most mod developers, when they do tutorials like this, they skip a lot of this boilerplate stuff. This boilerplate stuff, even though it is boring, its lack of entertainment and stuff, it is some of the most important code you will work on. Because if it fails, the rest of your mod fails with it. This is also where JUnit testing comes in, so you can prevent failures like this. Although I have not been able to fully test network code with packet handling at the moment, simply because my understanding is too low. Whenever I get that understanding fully built up, I will probably be able to actually get around to copying it all over. So we do have a packet manager now, so we can import this. We do need to get our common proxy set up, so we can close the network class, and we're going to just create a class. Now, how the proxies literally work is it's just a class file. There's literally nothing special to it. This is now a proxy. It's named proxy for the simple fact that you can find it. The naming convention doesn't matter. It being called common doesn't matter. It's simply named this way in order to make it easier to understand by other developers. The only thing you have to keep in mind when developing proxies is that when you have to use this at-side proxy system, or if you don't use this, you got to come up with your own way to do it. This is provided by Forge. Forge understands how to read this and understands how to implement your code. You define with the client side, this is the proxy that loads on client-only logic. Common proxy loads server side. You can actually make a server side proxy that then extends your common proxy, and your client proxy also extends your common proxy, and then have two different separate behaviors. And once upon a time, there was a bucket handler for this too. So if we actually open this up, they actually got rid of it. There used to be a bucket proxy in here. Now it's simply mod ID and then proxies. You don't need the mod ID anymore, thankfully. We just need to go ahead and rename this. This naming convention needs to match your package and your class name without the .class extension on the end. The .class extension is just understood that's how it is, because after all, you shouldn't be loading anything else than Java class files. If you're loading something else, then you're doing something special, and you would have your own code for that. But there we go, common proxy, client proxy, and I just have to create the client proxy real quick, and then extends common proxy. Now what you end up using the proxies actually for is you'll implement methods in here like this. You'll have a void pre-init, then you will have a init, and then post init. I'll go ahead and copy this to save myself a little bit of time. And these will be called by your init methods in your main class, and you'll use this to separate out logic. You want to only load client-side logic on the client. You never want to load on the server. One, if you load on the server, it's likely to crash. Two, it's not going to get used even if you manage to get it to load. So client-side logic stays on the client. But we'll go ahead and put these in here, and then you just call proxy.preinit. Unfortunately, Forge doesn't have a pre-built system for doing this. I do in my Volts engine, where proxies are handled by a prefab, but then the prefabs do this anyways, so it's not really saving any time. I'm hoping one of these days to get that fully fleshed out, where there is a pre-built system that is designed to handle proxies automatically, where you don't even have to store it in here. It'll just understand that there's proxies, and then you'll be able to call everything. But this is all set up. We've now got our boilerplate code. I'm going to get rid of that little high class. And yep, so what actually we need to do real quickly here is I need to make a new package here. So wojudo. And then that's everything we do with assets goes in here. All of our models, any file that would not be a class file pretty much. Now there are some special handling I also do, like if we go up to the Armory mod, I don't use the asset directory for content. So these are like gun files right here and ammo files. Now they're data. Theoretically I could put them in the asset file, but I don't do that because I don't want resource packs to override them. There's a possibility that with doing this, a resource pack could actually change the core functionality of the mod internally, and resource packs are not exactly supposed to do that. They're only supposed to control visuals. And, well, except when you get to Windows 10, and then you can do a lot more with them than you're supposed to be. But, where were we? Okay, so we're here. Now the first thing we're going to work on is, of course, this detonator. Additional videos here, I'll be working on other things. The client also wants a rifle, a handgun, an EMP gun, several crafting tables, things like campfires, forges, everything else. All this will be customized. He wants special handling for a little bit of everything. I'm going to show you guys how this is made. Fortunately, you guys are never going to be able to get the code for it. He wants it all to be kept private. So we're going to make a new package. We're going to call this content. We're going to make a placeholder in here real quick so I don't lose the structuring, and we'll just name this whatever. Unfortunately, how IntelliJ is designed, if you make a package inside of a package, it'll collapse to this structure. It's like assets.wojujo. I can no longer build something in the assets directory without specially creating it in some other way. Eclipse actually got around this by just letting you change the whole package structure name, but unfortunately, IntelliJ hasn't managed to do that yet because, after all, it is an edge case, and most people are not going to actually do it that way. We'll go ahead and we'll do this, and this will be, we'll just call it remote, or actually, we'll call it explosive, and then we'll make another placeholder real quick, and then we'll have a package called remote, and then we'll have another package called tile. In here we'll have an object which we'll need a block class. We'll have a block explosive. Then we'll have another object. Actually, we really don't even need a tile entity for this, but I'm going to do one anyway so that way we can keep track of who placed it. tile entity explosive. This will extend the tile entity class, and then if I go to the block real quick, this will extend the block container class. Block container has some pre-implementations for tile entities. It's best to just extend it when you're making tile entities, unless you want to go make your own implementation, which then you got to handle a lot of stuff yourself. I actually open this up. It handles block events. This is actually a basic packet system you can toy with. I've never managed to get it to work correctly, but I've been told it does work. It handles breaking of a block, which removes the tile entity, and it handles on-block added, which actually doesn't have any code in it. I believe the on-block added used to do something. And then of course it marks that we have this is a container and stuff. But in here we need to return new tile entity explosive. That's literally the extent you need to do to make a tile entity. Everything else in here is optional, and you don't really need to do anything in here. So this is literally the point. You now have a tile entity, you don't have a block. These are replaceable in the world. You can do stuff, although you do need to still register them. So we actually have to come back to our mod class here, and we would want to make a reference. So we'll call this block explosive. Now, in reality, you don't actually need to keep track of your references to your items in here. You can use another class, or you can just not track them at all. The cool thing is with the new system that they added in 1.7, where you can actually access the list of all blocks, you can call blockregistry.get and then the name of your block, and it'll give you back your block reference. So you don't actually need to be storing stuff in here. However, to keep with the standard I usually code with, I'm going to go ahead and store them, because then I can access them at any time, and another mod can access them at any time. And we're going to go ahead and put that here. And then we just got to do, so actually let me go ahead and create the item real quick so I can go ahead and register these. And this extends the item class, and that's basically an item right there. Now, it doesn't have anything on it. There's no content, there's no functionality, there's no anything. In order to implement anything feature-wise, you have to actually start extending methods and implement code. But at this point, they will show up inside the game. So actually we do block explosive equals new block explosive. That creates our new instance here. Actually, I need to go over here, and I need to make this public. And I need to change the material. So I want to say, so this is going to be a C4 block. The best material I can think of. I want to use circuit because that's usually what I use for machines half the time, but it isn't quite correct. Iron wouldn't work either because it's softer type material, although to be honest all these material types don't matter too much. But some mods usually assume iron is actually made of iron. Like I actually have my EMPs, when they go off, will detect iron blocks and will try to shoot lightning off iron blocks. So if I did this, you'll get hit by lightning off of a block of C4, which doesn't make sense because the C4 should detonate when an EMP hits it. Sand wouldn't be a horrible thing. Oh good, there's a TNT one which I misclicked and didn't get. That'll save me a little time. And then you need to set the hardness, which I'm going to go ahead and just set to 5. And then set resistance, which I'm going to set to 5 as well. If you forget to set these, your block will instantaneously break. It also is important to set the block's name, which we're going to need to make a prefix in here somewhere. Now you don't actually have to do this. This is actually optional as well, but it does save a lot of time. So one, we want to store the domain. This is our domain. Good thing is we actually store it. We can, when we go to change it, it'll change it in all places, which is a really nice feature of actually storing your stuff in a commonly accessible place. It also does just make life easier. And then prefix would be literally domain plus colon. Now what you end up using the prefix for is you put this in front of any of your localizations and any of your texture calls. So that way everything matches your domain. It is required for textures. So anytime you're going to use a texture, it's going to make it go to this domain path, which is your assets.wojudo here. And if you don't do that, it'll try to default to Minecraft, and you'll be trying to load textures out of the Minecraft folder, which will not work. When it comes to localizations, it is actually optional, but it is advisable because you're going to run into mods that will have the same localization as you at some point in time. So if you have like a localization called like item TNT, somebody may have item TNT and now you have a conflict of localizations. He may be calling his awesome TNT, you may be calling yours epic TNT. Now, depending on the loading order, you're going to get different things. But if instead you call your thing item dot wojujo colon TNT, you're guaranteed, unless somebody's being a douche, that you're going to have the correct localizations. Let's go back over here and we're going to be, I literally got to get a better mod name for this because typing in judo mod is going to actually probably get on my nerves after a while. And we're just going to call it the C4 because I'm not going to be inventive today. And then we want to set the texture name. Actually, because this is a 3D model, well, actually, let me check to make sure we even have models for this. If we do, I can go ahead and transfer them over into the folder and then show you how the folder structure sets up. Let me click this. Okay, that's going to take us to the same place. I need to go to the Google Drive. Like I've said in other videos, storing your stuff in a Google Drive is a really smart idea. One, it gives you backups. Two, it allows other people to get common access to your files. If you're working with a team, you want to use things like Google Drive, Dropbox, GitHub, various other collaboration tools. So go to here, Minecraft, requests, and then in here is most likely going to be the files I'm looking for. Okay, so we have the C4 remote. So we need to go in here, resources, assets, Ojujo. We need to make some new folders. So we're going to have a lang folder. This is where our localizations go. If you don't name it that way, you're not going to load localizations unless you add your own system. You need a textures folder, and then a models folder, which I don't advise actually making your own systems for half this stuff because I used to have a custom localization system. It was a pain to work on. It liked to fail way more than it did. The only advantage we had of it is that when we went to go do sub-dialects, and the only place we had sub-dialects for was China, because China has like has hundreds of sub-dialects. But yeah, moving on. So textures, in the textures folder, you want to make some packages here. So items, and then blocks. These are the only two the naming conventions actually matter on. Your blocks folder is going to be any of your blocks are going to load textures from here. Items, any of your items are going to load textures from there. Now you can have subfolders in here, although the usage on those is a little bit more confusing. But as well, you can add extra folders in here, like we can make a models folder for textures in here, we can do particles, GUIs, but when it comes to loading anything but these two, you can literally put anywhere in your asset folder, it doesn't really matter, as long as you set the paths up correctly. I'll show that probably at another time. But items, so we want to drag our C4 remote over, and let's see what else we got here. I don't think he's actually done the C4 itself, unless he did a model for it. He may have actually missed out on me saying that I requested a C4, not just a remote. Bummer, he didn't make the C4 block. So we'll go ahead and we'll just make it, and I'll tell him what I need later. But we have the remote, and then I'll make textures later. So we'll just code them up to look like something, probably like a wool block. Because I'm actually going to be using something called an ISBR for this. Now this only works in 1.7 and before. When you move to 1.8, 1.9, 1.10, 11, and soon to be 12, they use a JSON system. I don't know how to use that precisely. I do know some of the details to it, but I'll have to show that in a different video when I finally get around to updating my mods. But we'll show this off because this is actually cool. So it's I special block render, and then we name it explosive. Actually, it's I symbol block handler. I always forget the names of this because everybody uses the acronym for it. We go like this. So we want to store a render ID for this. So public int or public static int ID equals, I believe, render handler. I don't think it's render helper, but we can check that actually. Nope. We'll set it to 0 for a second here. I'll have to go look it up what it is. But this interface is pretty straightforward. Here's your render method for your inventory, your render world method, and should it render 3D in inventory. Now I don't like the render 3D anymore. I actually found out this is laggy more than just rendering things in worlds, because when you render things in world, they generally only render like once or twice or something like that. GUI items have a tendency to render multiple times per tick, and if you get a whole inventory full of 3D items, you will notice a frame rate drop. A significant enough one that we actually went through and changed all the renders and mods like ICBM to fix it. But we'll come back to this here in a bit. This is going to be using code similar to what I've got in the Basic Industries mod to create a 3D object without actually making models. At least that's the plan. As my cat sits here and stares at me. The only reason I made a note of that is last time I was recording, this cat actually tried to climb my leg. I did that while live streaming too, and that was, some people got a nice earful of noises made because a cat had claws on my leg. But moving back to this, so we've got that. We'll ignore that for a bit here. We've got our class here. Let's go back to registration of stuff because I didn't finish that. So game registry dot register block. So we've got the block class, and we want to name it something. So we'll call it explosive because I'm not being inventive today. We also want to go with, I believe, game registry dot register tile entity, and then we want tile entity explosive dot class, and we'll call it literally the same thing. These are registered to two separate handlers. This is registered to the base Minecraft games block registry. This is registered to the tile entity class. Theoretically, you can actually have an infinite number of tile entities. I've actually seen mods like GregTech, literally they have only like 1 or 2 blocks, and then they have like tons of tile entity based objects to get all their machines working. It's actually not a bad strategy. I'm thinking about moving to something very similar, not quite the same, but similar in order to get my block wrappers to work, which will end up replacing my need to build mods for multiple versions. But moving on here, item explosive equals new item remote, and then we got to register as well. The interesting thing to point out is I believe in 1.7 it started that you have to register these. Beforehand, you actually did not have to register your items. It was optional, but was advised. And then we'll call this WJ explosive remote. It's a good idea to keep with some kind of naming convention. Now, in theory, Forge will actually append something to the front of this to make sure that there's not a duplication. But I've had, even in recent events, people report like, hey, because you have this name and it's similar to another mod, the two are conflicting with each other. It hasn't happened in a while. Last time it happened was with IC2. I had a generator. It literally was called generator and IC2S generator. And the two overlapped with each other, so you couldn't install the mod and had to go through and rename things. Cool thing is if you ever go to rename something, you actually can, there's a event you can catch that will let you change the block over so that you don't corrupt the worlds. I'll show that off as a later date because I just figured out how to use that rather recently, and it's really nice. It allows backwards compatibility with stuff. But yeah, these are registers. These will show up in the game. I probably should create a creative tab. So we'll go ahead and actually create one. So public static creative tab. And then, trying to think of what to do with the creative tab here. So I believe I need to make a new creative tab class. Yeah, see these guys do their own creative tab classes here. So I'm just going to copy this code. I'll come back through here and I'll make a nicer one. In ICBM, I actually use a custom template, and then I customly implement the order of the items in the GUI. That way, every time you open the GUI for the creative tab, all the items are in the correct order. If you've actually noticed this from other mods, every time you open the creative tab, the items are in slightly different orders per run. This is because of the sorting algorithms that Minecraft uses and a few other things that end up creating, I wouldn't say crap, but they end up creating something that isn't going to work every single time. And then, shoot, is there a way to, yeah, okay, cool. I can just go ahead and remove this. And we'll just call this Wojudo because I need to get a mod name from the client still. And yeah, we'll just use the explosive remote right now. Yeah, that works. And what I did here, by the way, in case people are not familiar with this is called an inner class. It's when you create a class within a class, but inside of a method or some other place. Not advisable to do. If you ever do it in a place that's ever only going to be called once, because every time this runs, this creates a new class instance. So say you had a loop here, there would literally be like creative tab 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, depending on how many times you loop. Really bad strategy, eats up RAM. Like eventually you will run out of RAM if you put this in a stupid spot. I've seen people do it. You never want to do it this way. I'm doing it because we need to get something quick out of the way so I can go ahead and I can set creative tabs. And actually I need to move this up. Make sure this is here. I actually need to move my proxy down here. And then in each of these classes, I then need to do set creative tab. And then we'll call, there we go. So that sets our creative tab, so this item will show up on our creative tab. And if we go over to the item class, we can do the same thing for it. Now, if people who end up using Volts Engine, it does this for you automatically as long as you tell the mod registry or mod handler inside it that you want to have a creative tab that's the same on all items. Put that there, and then we also need to do set unlocalized name, and then it'll be judomod.prefix plus item, or we'll do explosive remote. I don't need to put the word item in there because it already does it for me. And then we can do set texture as well. And if we set this to be exactly the same as our texture file, it'll preload our texture for us. So this is C4 underscore remote. And we don't need the ping because it's implied. But that should load up. And if I go and make a localization at the same time here before we even do any other work, we'll automatically have translations. Now the naming convention on this is pretty much the language and then the region. So in this case it's English underscore United States. UK would have a slightly modified one and only for the local dialect because they, of course, we call things over here, say like a bag of chips, which is little potato whatever things. They're called crisp over in the UK. They call fries chips, we call them fries over here. So there's little subtleties in the language that you have to keep in mind for. And it changes per region, so if you had like English in Africa, there would actually be sub-variations in the language that you would have to keep in mind. But that's for a whole nother lesson that I probably would never cover because localizations are the bane of my existence because I only speak one language. And as hard as I've tried, I have not managed to learn Spanish even though I literally try to work at that probably every couple days. My extent is to say I can't speak Spanish, which is like no hablo español, I believe. See, I've already forgot it. But moving back to this, so let me go back here. So we called it explosive remote, so we'll copy this. And I'm going to have to redo these localizations later. So our mod domain is wojujo, so it's like this, .name, and this would literally be C4 remote. That simple. And then we would have a block name. So we called our block explosive C4. So yeah, literally not being inventive here. I believe the naming convention for this is tile.wojudo because we have that prefix. C4 and then .name. So this would be C4. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much straight here. And this is what I was talking about. If you put a prefix in front of this, it helps reduce the chance of conflict. You literally, between the dots here, so between the tile and the name, you can put literally anything in here as long as the .lang format allows you to do it. Now, .langs, I believe, are considered property files, so property files have a standardization, like you can't do, I believe, new lines in here. There's a few other things that you're not supposed to do in here. I've had it spit errors at me every single time we try to build with the Gradle scripts. Now IntelliJ isn't going to show any errors in here, but like say if we ran it on the build server would be like, hey, there's like 15 warnings in here and there's maybe like 3 errors. And you need to go correct them because then the build server will actually fail at some point. But translations are added, all that's set up, this would actually load. So we'll go ahead and hit project structure. Now when you have a huge layout like this, the way to launch all of your mods at once, because some people who are probably familiar with IntelliJ will notice this, you can only launch one mod at a time unless you do what I do here. I've created a modular, and I've literally add all of my stuff as dependencies. So here's our new mod. We add it in here, hit apply, and if I run it, it should load. Now it might error out because of course we just went ahead and created everything without really thinking it through too much. But hopefully, with fingers crossed, it'll actually load. Unfortunately, it's going to take forever to load though. I'd say we probably could code things while we're waiting for this, but any attempt to change the code majorly outside of, because you can change codes inside method, Y in debug mode, and if you hit reload, it will actually modify the code in real time. But if you change something outside of a method, like add a method, add a field up here, change like say the headers up here, then they'll go like, hey, you can't reload. You know what, we can actually go ahead and do that because the only thing we're going to do with this load time is we're just going to go quickly check to make sure that the content is functional, that we can see it, the creative tab loaded, the language loaded, our first texture loaded, and everything else. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go look up the code for this real quick. And I'm not going to start on this, but I'm going to make sure that the default data is in here. If I can go find the mod, because I can never remember what half these methods are called because you literally only write them once. Somebody who's probably spent, I wouldn't say more time, who's got a better memory than me would be able to memorize this stuff. My memory either works most days or does not work most days. There's no super efficiency mode to it at all. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this class. It's not the file. Here we go. This is what I'm looking for. Yeah, there was... I forgot I was testing the fluid modular system. So one of the things I'm actually working on outside of normal mods is I'm like actually trying to break VoltsEngine down into libraries now. That way they're incredibly reusable, other mod developers can reuse them, and they don't conflict with each other. Plus they're really easy to update when you do that. But I was actually testing to make sure the configs loaded meta values for buckets. One of the things I worked on, and this is the reason why, if anybody's watched Twitter, I made a gas can mod literally in 20 minutes. The reason I made it in 20 minutes is because the only thing I had to do was just write a mod class, create a get thing, and then load textures. The bucket was already there. All I had to do is go like, hey, can you load the bucket? And then I went, hey, here's a new material type for your bucket. Which, ironically, you'd be going like, wait, you're talking about a bucket. I thought you were making a gas can. Well, when you look at the code, a bucket and a gas can work identically. The only difference between them is what the player visually sees. And this is the same way in real life. A gas can and a bucket are just fluid containers. The way they operate is very slight differences that are entirely visually based. They both can easily contain 1 gallon of fluid or more. And when it comes to usage, they just pour slightly different. Like you can actually throw a bucket of water at somebody where trying to get the contents of a gas can empty all at once is not going to happen. But looking at this, I need to grab this one. So I was close. It's render registry, not render helper. And I need to go and put this over here. You do have to reserve your ID because for some reason they keep track of your IDs. Other than that, you don't have to really do much else. That was a weird noise. Hopefully that came from my computer, not outside, because that was sounded like a howler monkey. Shoot, I don't have render utility. I was like, yeah, we'll just call it render utility and we'll render a cube. All honesty, because the client has not given me any conditions by which he wants these mods to be made, I am not going to rewrite like half of my code. So we're going to actually go up here. We're going to click this. We're going to go dependencies, modular dependency, and I'm going to make this use VoltsEngine because VoltsEngine has a lot of really nice shiny bits in it that make life incredibly easy. And it's been developed over 5 years, so most of the parts work really well. But if we do that, then I literally can just do this and we'll render a cube because we just want it to work real quick. And You know what, we'll render it in 3D in the inventory because after all we're only rendering a cube, and I'm going to copy these other two methods because I'm going to actually need this one here later. Because after all, this is literally just to render like I think 4 boxes inside of a cube. It's a lot of work just to do that. And we're going to be doing literally the same thing with the C4 block. Let's load this up real quick. See how long we're at the video time. Man, we're at 50 minutes already. Yeah, this is going to have to be broken down in a couple parts. Luckily, I've got till, I want to say 10 or 11 o'clock, somewhere around there to work. I'm going to be pausing these videos at hour increments just to kind of keep the upload time down, and we have fatally killed something. Open the debug console, open this up, click. Ah. I have borked something. I think I actually messed up my packet handler for grappling hook here. You know, rather than trying to decide what I broke, let me go scroll down here. Really cool thing you can do if you actually do use Git is if you know you have messed up, and that you know you've messed up really good, all you have to do is find your mod. This is the reason I hate this software so much, is it's really hard to find what you're looking for. Click this. It'll tell you what has changed. Nothing has changed. Okay, I actually know what I did wrong here. I named my packet handler the same. So we're going to call this Whoa Judo. I'm going to get a name from the client on what he wants to call this mod. Probably name it after his mod pack, most likely. That's usually what most clients do when they ask for custom mods. But we got to kill Minecraft, so we're not going to be able to confirm that everything is loaded. But what we can do real quick is go ahead and implement some really simple code in here, and then we'll launch again, and then we'll call that a breakpoint. So let's open this, and we want to render standard block. And then we want to return true. If you don't return true, it will not render. How this works is when you return true or false from here, it returns false saying you have not rendered anything, return true saying you have rendered something, and then the world code uses that to differentiate between things. It's due to the fact that this actually only ever gets called anytime the chunk changes or anything surrounding the block changes. So it needs to know if you've actually rendered something to know it needs to re-update the world. Because if everything it calls saying like false, I have not rendered anything different, it's going to use the previous render. We'll go ahead, we'll leave that code there, and then I need to go back to here real quick just to copy some code from the client proxy because I never can remember this code. And I'll also need to come back for this here later. Although I do not have a 3D item for the remote. I may ask my modeler to make one, but he may tell me probably no. Let's see, go over here, and this is where overriding that, or creating those pre-init things is used. If I forgot the void there. Put this here, and we just need to make sure we rename this so it's ISBR explosive. Cool. That's set up. It'll now actually utilize our thing as long as I do one more thing. Let's see, get, I believe it's get render type. I'll have to go copy this method real quick. Easy way to find methods, by the way, is if you can at least remember part of them, is you can type in here. It'll then give you a list of what you're looking for. You then grab it with that, and then you can hit Control B in IntelliJ. It'll take you to the method. And you can really quickly get to stuff, really quickly find things. You copy the method you're looking for, and you can just paste it in here. You don't have to be like one of those wizards who can memorize all the methods in something. Most developers do not know the name of all the methods in there that they're working with. It's one of those really hard things that you're just never going to be able to do. Actually, I wouldn't say never because there are people that actually have pulled it off. And there have been good days when I've been coding where I can remember a good majority of these just simply because I've done this for 7 years. But this is all set up, all good. Everything's here. I don't see anything missing. I can get rid of that placeholder. And we're going to put another package in here, that way get rid of the placeholder. So what's the other thing I need to work on for him? I think campfire. That's really going to be an easy thing. That's literally like copy the furnace, rename a few things to make sure it meets my standards, and do a few other things. And we'll hit debug real quick, and we'll load everything up. Now, of course, when I go to work on this, I'm going to actually have to do on right-click methods in here. In the tile entity, I'm going to have to do update methods because when you go to set the C4 off, it's going to have to tick. It's going to have to make audio that goes beep, 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 blow up. And then when it hits blow up, it's going to have to create an explosion. As well, I got to feed into the client's custom damage system, which he wants to be implemented where you handle block damage a little differently. Rather than doing conventional damage, it's supposed to damage special tiles and stuff, and however that client wants to handle it. He'll give me more details, and I'll be like, hey, here's the price for those details, and we'll move on from there. Although we've set most of the prices so far. The only one that hasn't been set is he wants to make a custom RPG system for his mod pack, and I'm like, I've given you probably what the minimum value is going to be, but depending on how complex the RPG system will be, the price can go up and down. And yeah, I haven't uploaded anything yet here. When it comes to using GitHub, by the way, if I can go find what I'm working on, it's all the way up here. Now, it doesn't matter what tool you're using, GitHub works exactly the same on everything. You have changes you want to make. First one, you want to ignore IML files. You don't want to sync these. So this works about the same. You have files you want to change. You need to stage the changes. Each tool does this differently. The actual command line has a way to stage these individually, although usually most people just stage everything. Then when you stage your changes, you just write a commit message, be like init files, and then started work on C4. And then you click, on this case, I want to push at the same time. Now you can make commits without actually uploading to remote. A push is an upload to the remote. If we hit commit, it'll actually do its magic and it'll upload. And this application takes longer than it really should. And then if, like, say somebody you were working with a team and somebody made changes up here and you're like, hey, there's a change here, you hit pull. Pull downloads the changes. Now you can pick what branch you download it from. You can pick what server. Like, you can have multiple servers set up. I used to work on projects where we had like 10 servers, and every time you uploaded, it uploaded all 10 servers at the same time. That was a super paranoid client that I only did a couple things for, because every time he wanted something, he wanted me to write this huge detailed paper explaining every last detail, because he was paranoid I was putting code into his mods that was going to do something damaging when it was literally like a 5-line class file. But that's part of freelancing. You get a mix of everybody. It's enjoyable work, although it doesn't pay well. You gotta usually work on things like websites and stuff to get paid well as a freelancer, at least where I'm at right now. Like, every company in the state I live in, which is Ohio, wants to hire web developers, basically. They put the job description as like, hey, I want a Java developer, but then as you read the description, it's like, no, you want a web developer. You want somebody who knows JavaScript. You want somebody who knows all the servlets and stuff. That's a web developer, even though it's like a web backend developer, is what they're actually looking for. I believe DevOps is the term. Alright, and I'm back here. Had to really quickly just ask somebody a few questions here and there. So it looks like our textures are not loading correctly. Our block render is working though, because the reason I can tell is it's slightly offlined. If you look at this is lined correctly. If you look at that, it's not. It's off by a pixel. The default render handlers that are built in Volts Engine are not exactly the most perfectly lined up, but then you're not supposed to actually be using them for inventory render code. But yeah, the texture didn't load, which is unfortunate. The localization did load on both these. So C4, C4 remote, so we know both of them do work. You can hold them, they exist, we have our own tab. Unfortunately, we're going to have to do some more work. So we'll go ahead and close this down. And I'm going to call that the cut point here, so I can go do some else, and then I'll come back here in a second.